Some major changes in the rankings this week, including at the top. It's time for my Week 6 Top 25. Yes, we're heading into Week 6 already. And I tell you what, the rankings are really, really hard for me this week. I have 9 teams that I feel like are the top 9. I think based off of what we have seen, those are the best 9 teams. And then there is a huge jumbled up group of teams behind those 9 teams. It's more than can fit in the top 25. So I'm already, I don't normally necessarily do this early in the season, but I'm going resume. So for those teams, now my top 9, I rank those teams again based off of what I've seen this year, who I think the best teams are. But the rest of the teams are so close, and we've seen them with highs and lows, ups and downs. I'm going with resume. So resume is what it's going to be for teams 10 through 25. And we're going to start at the bottom here. So we go to number 25. That is Texas A&M. Aggies 4-1. They've got a win over Florida, a win over Arkansas. Not great wins, but their only loss comes to Notre Dame. And because that loss was to a top 25 team, they come in barely in these rankings. Oklahoma has wins over Houston, not very good. Tulane is a very solid group of 5 team. And then Auburn on the road this past Saturday. Again, not a great resume, but it's good enough. And you've got your one loss coming to a top 5 team in Tennessee. So yeah, Oklahoma does get into the rankings this week. You've got Iowa at number 23. Only win is Minnesota. Not a great win. But their loss came to Iowa State. And Iowa State's a top 25 team. That's why they're at number 23. Nebraska at number 22. The win over Colorado is starting to look really good. Colorado beat UCF kind of, pretty easily this past weekend. So that win's starting to look better. Their only loss coming to Illinois, who I've got at number 21. They beat Kansas, and of course they beat Nebraska, and their only loss coming to a top 10 Penn State team. So those teams come in at the bottom. I'm just going to quickly run through teams that you're probably going to be surprised by, some of these that are not in my rankings. And again, it's all based off of resume. UNLV, very close. Ole Miss is not ranked for me. And you can say what you want, but if you ignore preseason expectations, Ole Miss just lost to Kentucky at home. Kentucky is not a bad team, but they're not. That's not a great loss. And their only win is Wake Forest. That's their only decent win. I don't even know if you can call that decent. Wake Forest has not been good at all. So Ole Miss has not done anything to deserve to be ranked. Now they're going to have their opportunities. I still think Ole Miss probably is a top 25 team, but like I said, the 9 teams that I'm sure about behind those teams, I went all with resume. Only resume. That's all that I looked at. So that's why Ole Miss is not ranked. Boston College, I think you can make an argument for them. Colorado's in this discussion now. UCF. Rutgers is undefeated. Beat Washington and Virginia Tech. Pretty solid wins. They're very close. These are in no particular order, by the way. Boise State, they got the win over Washington State now. That's a good win, and they lost to Oregon. So I think Boise State's right there on the edge. James Madison and Duke are both undefeated. They've got a win over North Carolina, although they don't look great. Pittsburgh's undefeated, win over West Virginia and Cincinnati. Arizona. Now, this is a tricky one. So Arizona did beat Utah. That's a top 25 win. But Cam Rising didn't play, so I'm not really sure how I want to evaluate that win. That's a tough one. SMU, they beat TCU and Florida State. Those were decent wins. South Carolina has a win over Kentucky. A Kentucky team that, again, just beat Ole Miss, so you could definitely consider the Gamecocks. I think all those teams that I just mentioned, you could make an argument for them being ranked. If you have a problem with my rankings and you're saying that one of those teams should be ranked, that's fine. You've got an argument. I absolutely can see an argument for any of those teams. So I'm telling you, it's tough to rank teams right now. That's why we have to go to the resume. Like I said, we don't normally go to the resume this early, at least this much into the resume. You always want to look at that a little bit once you get 4 or 5 games in. But I went with all resume for this huge group of teams. There's a ton of parity. There is a ton of parity in college football this year. Let's go to 16 through 20 now. We've got Louisville at number 20. Tough loss to Notre Dame. Had some chances in that game. Just did not play very well. They've got a win over Georgia Tech. That's a decent win. And again, only loss coming to Notre Dame. Missouri, they're undefeated. They've won over Boston College, who is a team, again, I considered, that's a team that could potentially be ranked right now. Vanderbilt's been better this year, but still, Missouri, we need to see more from them. Indiana, they've got 2 Power 4 wins, Maryland and UCLA, and they're undefeated, and they haven't struggled. So, Missouri struggled to beat Vanderbilt. Indiana hasn't really struggled at all. That's why I've got them ranked ahead of them by 1 spot. You got Utah. Again, don't really know what to do with Utah. They beat Oklahoma State. Then they lost to Arizona. No Cam Rising. Where do you rank them with Cam Rising? That is a tough one. I've got them at 17. That just kind of made the most sense for me. Kansas State ahead of them. Wins over Tulane, Arizona, and Oklahoma State. They're starting to build a pretty good resume. The one thing that's hurting them is the blowout loss to BYU. Iowa State at number 15. They're 4-0. Wins over Iowa. And Houston, obviously that Iowa win is big for them. And they've looked pretty good in their other games. They haven't really struggled at all. Iowa State's a team that I think people are sleeping on a little bit. And yeah, I forgot to mention them when I was talking about the Big 12 contenders yesterday. But, I didn't change my graphic here. So, yeah, Iowa State at 15 there. I didn't talk about them when I was talking about top contenders of the Big 12. They just slipped my mind. Yes, Iowa State's in that conversation. BYU just ahead of them. They've got the win over Kansas State. That's a big-time win. They also beat SMU. SMU looks good. They just blew out Florida State. I know Florida State's not good, but they dominated that game. They also won over Baylor. So BYU looks like they're pretty legit. LSU at number 13 wins over South Carolina and UCLA. But the big thing for them is their one loss. It came to USC in a very close game. USC, of course, you see at number 11. Notre Dame at number 12. Wins over A&M and Louisville. Very good wins, really, out of this cluster of teams. They've got the best wins, but they lost to Northern Illinois. So what do you do about that? That's tough. I've got Notre Dame at number 12. Now USC at number 11 wins over LSU, and then it went over Wisconsin. Not a great win there, but it's decent. And again, USC's only loss came to Michigan, who I've got at number 10. So let's go ahead and skip to the top 10 now. Michigan at number 10. That's the final team in this group of teams. So yeah, Michigan has the best resume because of their win over USC, also beat Minnesota, and their loss coming to a top 5 team in Texas. Again, I think Michigan does have the best resume. Do I think they're the 10th best team in the country? Not really, but I try to be fair with my rankings. I try not to do rankings based off of just who I think is better, and maybe that's what you guys want, but I like to base it off of performance, resume, those types of things. I like to see teams earn their rankings, not just be given their rankings because I think they're the better team, because I don't think that's a good way to rank teams. But yeah, Michigan at number 10. Then we get to the top 9. And to me, these top 9 teams have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. I think your national championship winner is going to come out of these top 9 teams, maybe top 5 or 6, really. But Clemson, I mean, they've shown a lot. They didn't play as good against Stanford, but they still won that game easily. Oregon looks like they're back on track with an easy win this past weekend. Miami, close win, I should say, to Virginia Tech. Controversial call. Of course, that was a crazy ending in that game. But teams have bad games. I mean, look, Georgia barely beat Kentucky. So unless that happens again, like over and over, then I'm not really concerned about Miami. I still think this is a really good team. And then Penn State at number 6 looked like the Penn State team that I was kind of expecting against Illinois. They looked better than I expected against West Virginia, but then a lot worse against Bowling Green. And then, again, back to kind of what I expected, a top 10 team. That's what they look like against a pretty solid Illinois team. So, yeah, I've got Penn State number 6. And then we go to the top 5 here. Of course, you see Alabama now at number 1. Buckeyes of Ohio State at number 5. An easy win over Michigan State. Really haven't seen them tested yet, so I don't know really how good this team is. Still trying to figure that out. We've seen Georgia now play 3 quality opponents, Clemson, Kentucky, and Alabama. If that first half, like if the whole game had stayed like that first half was going, I don't know if Georgia would even be in my top 10. But, of course, we saw them bounce back and play really well in that second half, almost won the game against Alabama. So I still think Georgia's really good. Tennessee at number 3. A very impressive win over Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago. NC State, they blew them out. I want to see them play a really quality opponent, though. I'm really curious to see just how good this Tennessee team is. Texas at number 2. They haven't really been tested. The win over Michigan was very, very good. That was a nice win. But I got to go with Alabama at number 1 after beating Georgia. And the way they looked in that first half, I know they almost blew that game. But And you also have to look at the Wisconsin game. They were so good in that game. Wisconsin just went out and played USC pretty tough. So I think Alabama's got to be number one right now. It's close between Alabama and Texas. I still think you can make an argument for Texas because they haven't really shown any signs of weakness, really haven't struggled at all. Alabama did have the struggles against South Florida. But again, tiebreakers for me, if I'm really close on two teams, I'm going to go with the resume. Alabama now has the better resume, and then Texas. So that's how I would rank the teams heading into week 6. Would love to get your thoughts, your rankings. Let me know what you think down in the comments below.